Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 102. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com. We're excited to have with us the creative team of Bardic Verses, Matt, Summo, and Pete Collins. Matt and Pete, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, You're welcome. Yeah, and you guys just had your Kickstarter was launched yesterday as of this recording. And right now it's 64% to your goal. So I don't want to, the karmic deities of saying anything that, but that is a really good first start. So, yeah. So congratulations in advance on that. I'm excited to talk to you all about this. It's, looking at it, just seeing some of your previous interviews and we'll do a deep dive into it, but it's amazing to see, Pete, what your artwork, you've done these odes to, different styles of comics, which is amazing on itself. And also, Matt, I know you said in there, this is the funnest project you've worked on. So We want to talk about that a bit, but first so the two of you kind of met at work. So there was this, eyes across the room at a Christmas party thing that kind of happened.
Yeah. Typical 80s rom-com kind of thing, We were like, people were like, hey, this guy's written some comics. And I was like, oh, and then, he saw some stuff that I had hanging around the building and he's like, who's the artist? And then it was love at first sight.
They call that, it was a meet cute in the biz.
Yes.
That's what they call that. But meet is spelled MEAT.
Yeah. I mean, with our size, it has to be.
Yeah.
So that because Matt, you've worked a lot in the field for quite some time, and you kind of got started on working at, was it Double Take for a bit?
Yep.
And so you've been doing that for a while. So you've played around with some comic anthologies in the past, and that's how the two of you kind of grabbed Pete and say, hey, can you do a pinup for me? At one of your last, was it your last anthology you did, correct?
It was the one, I think it was the one before that. So the last one I did was Deadbeats. The one before that was it was a wrestling anthology called Kayfabe Volume 3.
Right. Okay. And that was 3 years ago, correct?
Give or take. Was it that long ago? Was it 3 years
Was
ago?
It? Wow.
Time really blends together these days.
Where did those days go?
So fast forward. So in between this 3 years, talk to us a bit about what transpired between Kayfabe volume 3, you said?
Yeah.
Between that and the fact that, so was this like a work in progress? You said like this Bardic Verses kind of been inspired by the Witcher, and how the Bard is always the tertiary character in any D&D campaign. I'm in a D&D campaign now where I actually am playing the Bard specifically for the same reasons why you guys say, just sort of like, because that way I don't have to quite pay attention to the game. I can just do Bardic inspiration or do heroism, and then So what happened in between? So you mentioned this kind of gets the Witcher kind of help inspired, but The Witcher came out last year, so there was like a year or so. So how did you guys keep talking, and were you actively trying to find a project to work together, or how did that work?
So after Kayfabe Volume 3, Pete and I were talking back and forth. We were sort of working on a project that had a lot of start and stops to it. Right now it's on indefinite hiatus until we figure out what we want to do next with it. But Pete was initially just going to color that book. We had another illustrator on there, our buddy Nick, who was going to do all the sequentials. Our buddy Carlos is going to ink it, and then Pete would color it. but then Pete and I, like, on the side, we're just talking about, like, something else to work on in the meantime, like while we were waiting for pages for Pete to work on. And then we would just started spitballing ideas back and forth. And he brought up a bard, and that, like, when he started talking about the bard and we were talking about The Witcher, I don't know why, but like I immediately thought of like a set list, right? So an musical artist will play a concert, they'll play a set list, they'll usually play the greatest hits. I thought of, sometimes they play songs that are not like their styles, right? They'll play something that's out of their catalog, they'll do a cover song or whatever. So I thought, this would be a cool idea. Like if we utilize this format of a set list for a comic and just say that this bard is performing these, or telling these stories, performing these songs in different styles, so then the different styles of music can translate it to different styles of art. So I told Pete that idea. I was like, hey, what do you think about this? We started spitballing ideas as far as what artists he would want to replicate, and then we were off to the races. Like, it was, once we had the bones to this book, like, it was just all systems go.
Right. Yep. And Pete, for you, so when you, the two of you are talking about this, so was it always going to be you doing different art styles, or was there ever a talk where you're like, hey, let's grab some other artists in here, or was that always going to be?
It was always, that was always the plan. I like to think that I'm versatile, and I like to challenge myself, and I couldn't think of it. I can't think of any other challenge than drawing outside of my comfort realm, Right. So that was always the plan, was to do these different songs or sections of the story in a different art style. And the first one that we did isn't really him performing a song. It's actually him kind of thinking back. It's within the first couple of pages of the book, and we go right into a Kirby style. And that was the first one that I had done that, took me away from my style. There he is. Right. Look at him. Yeah. And it was, I had a blast with it. That's not how I draw. And, I was diving into anything I could find. And that adds a little delay to it too, right? Because if it were me drawing my style that I'm comfortable with, it would move along, I think, a little bit faster. But to have to stop to dive into, Kirby art, and there's so much of it, and some of it hard to digest, but in a good way. So it's having to train myself to draw like him without being too Kirby, Right. So it was interesting. And of course you pull a lot of good things out of that, and a lot of bad things, the things that I learned, most of it I kept, but then I also had to unlearn certain things, just kind of like dissecting our other artists' styles. It definitely an experience. So
right. No, so for you, Matt, did you also kind of have to tweak your writing style to match with some of that? Because some of these, like Disney-fied, or some of them, like, you have like the Bill Watterson, you got the Frank Miller. Did you have to do the same amount of study that, Pete did, to say, I need to make the sound different also?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I will say, in one of the stories we do, there's heavy Frank Miller influence. So a lot of that is very like caption heavy. Like you're reading the main character's like inner monologue through the whole thing. Right. So I really had to go overboard on that, I think. And then for Disney, I had to write a straight up musical number. So, and that was, I still like, I'm still sort of like uneasy about it. Like, I don't know if it's any good. I actually might bring in a friend of ours who studied musical theater, who like performed in musicals, and just ask her to take a look at it and be like, hey, is this okay? Like, does this sound good? Like, can you see this being in a production? But yeah, there was some stuff where I had to get into that headspace, and then most of it, I was fortunate enough to kind of write in my voice, which is good.
Right. And so let me ask. So this is the beautiful part about kind of doing an anthology setting, but only working with one artist and also working with one writer.
Mhm.
Do you guys have a favorite story where you said, I learned a lot from that, or like that really tried, that really pushed me to the edge, but I think I came out better on doing this piece? Was there anything for you, Pete, that you
Oh yeah.
it actually helped out your base style?
Yeah, there's a section of the book that's very extreme. Um, it's a little Liefeldian, and I wouldn't say that I learned what to do by doing that section, but I did learn a few shortcuts, right? Like things like, how to angle faces, I guess. But there were certain things where it was like after I was done drawing that and I went back to doing my own style, it was like, okay, I do this for a particular reason, so it was
Right.
almost, yeah, I found some reassurance in how I draw. Not to say I'm better. I'm not going that route, but I'm different,
Right.
and there were things. It was a breath of fresh air when I finished that last page of that one.
Right.
Um, uh, and I really did enjoy the Bill Watterson page. That's a single page story, and I don't typically get too cartoony. So that one was a nice change up.
Mm.
It was nice to kind of play with that and to kind of utilize more brush like features in my tablet. So that was a cool one.
Right. And what do you use for so do you use a title? Do you use Procreate when you did this, or was you?
I do now. I do now. The first 5 pages I actually drew on an iPad Air. I used like a lower grade drawing app called Art Studio, which isn't horrible. It's just not, it doesn't have too many bells or whistles, and it's very basic. And I was bouncing back and forth between like a cheap $5 stylus and my finger, right? Like that was it. And when we hit a certain point, I said, I got to elevate my game. I got the iPad Pro. I learned Procreate over a weekend. I got the Apple Pencil. And at that point, I had also, I started firing through pages, and it was like, okay, now I've got a combination of things where I was drawing true sequential, right? Like page one, page two, etc., straight down the line.
Right.
So I was ping ponging back and forth between other people's styles and my own. So the things that I was picking up, it was evident like my style had changed by the time I got back around to it. And on top of that, my whole setup had changed. So the first 2.5 pages, and then page five, yeah, I completely redid. I actually did that like a couple weeks ago,
Right.
just to make sure that when it goes back to my style, that it's uniform, because we've been working on this for a little more than a year, so there's been a lot of growth, I feel, on my end
Right.
with this for sure. So making sure that it was uniform was really important to me. So.
And what about you, Matt? Was there anything that writing this? Is there anything that you've kind of discovered or kind of helped out with your writing style?
Yeah, there's a couple things I will say for sure. The Watterson page, I laugh every time we talk about it, because it really is like, we go a long way to make a really dumb joke, but it works so well, that I'm pretty proud of it, and I think Pete really knocked it out of the park.
I love that one.
And then the last verse in the book, I think that took me a long way, because I had to write a lot of action in that, and I feel like I sort of got like a better sense of how to panel out action. And of course, like working with Pete is great, because him and I just go back and forth. He'll be like, hey, like, can we blow this out and like make this a couple more panels, and then I'll go back in and rewrite if I need to, or adjust on the fly if I have to. So I think we definitely hit our stride as far as how well we collaborate by the time we hit that last story, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
So let's talk about the Kickstarter. So let's pull it up, and what we can do is just kind of give people a kind of like a little seeing all the different levels, seeing or hearing about all the different levels. For the point of some people that might be listening to this podcast, will kind of do an audio commentary of the different pledge levels. So you have your tip jar,
yep,
which is always good, and you then have the PDF version, right? This is what the pledge level, the $20 level is. There's a couple. Okay, do you want to talk to us about that?
Yep. So the $20 level is it's literally the digital copy of the book, and you also get a couple of digital comics that I've done in the past. It's sort of like we call it the digital bundle. It's the same cost as the book. It's just you're not paying shipping. It's just $20 flat.
Okay.
But yeah, then there's going to be a playlist that we're going to do that's with music that inspired the book as well.
So that's interesting. So is it like a playlist of like known music, or this is music that you've actually like?
Yeah, it's going to be not music that I created. It's going to be just a playlist of songs that inspired certain scenes in the book. I was definitely listening to a lot of music when I wrote it, so I have all that stuff in the back of my head. So you can basically see like, all right, when I was writing this scene, I was listening to this song.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. But then you have the physical version. So, but if someone gets the physical version, it'll come out sooner than the digital version?
No, it should be. That's weird. It should be the same time frame. That
okay.
Typo on my part. No, it should definitely be the same. And again, the physical is the same cost as the digital, but you're paying shipping on top of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. And then you have talk to us about the Shopkeeper's Delight.
Yep. So that was our way to help stores. Like if they want to carry the book, they're basically getting 6 copies of the book at cost, plus shipping. So that one's obviously hasn't seen a lot of movement yet, but I haven't done any real shop outreach for that one, which I plan on doing shortly. But yeah, just a standard retail tier.
Okay. All right. And then you kind of start getting into some more fun stuff here where you have some limited tier levels.
Yeah, it's surprising how many of those got snatched up on day one. Honestly, it's
right.
That was a nice surprise.
Yeah,
nice.
And that's the so what you get there is the physical copy, a 5x7 ink commission, and is that. So they get a physical copy of that, but you also have some small things in there too, right? What is?
Yep, every physical copy of the book. We wanted to make it a good experience, know. So every physical copy of the book is going to come with a couple of stickers. It's going to come with a bookmark. That bookmark is going to have a QR code. We do have a merch site, which we don't talk too much about, but it'll have a QR code on that for 20% off. Everything's going to be shrink wrapped together with a cardboard backer. It's going to have a signed book plate that's going to have my signature, Matt's signature, and our letterist, Matt Krotzer's signature on it. And in this particular bundle, I'll be making sure that the inked commission is going to be wrapped. I'm going to take good care of it with like tissue paper, make sure it's good, and it's going to go in the package as well.
Okay. And and then the difference between the traditional traditional art and then the digital portrait is that you don't have the traditional piece, but you on the black and white heavy stock card, right? But then you'll have a digital, a 500 DPI TIFF. Okay. Instead.
Big one. And that one's geared toward more of like the D&D crowd. Right. So I'll draw your character for you.
Okay.
You know, I think that's kind of a thing, and I didn't realize that was how big of a thing that is nowadays either, which is kind of weird to me. Like,
Right.
you know, I played Dungeons and Dragons 15, 20 years ago, and I used to just freely like throw out drawings at people I was playing with, like, hey, here's your character. Hey, here's your character. And now it's like people are making $50 a whack out of it. You know, it's crazy.
And so then for $200, you basically can get that digital art that you would make for somebody on a canvas portrait.
Yep, we have an awesome canvas company that we work with. They have some really cool bells and whistles, like some slightly metallic effects and that sort of thing. So
Okay.
it's not just going to be like a printout. It's going to be like really high def. I've done personal work with them before too, like for you know, friends of family, that sort of thing. Doing portraits of, you know, kids dressed up as Spider-Man or that sort of thing.
Right.
And I've never had any complaints about it. So it's yeah.
Do you, so this is awesome. And like you've already have, you know, 3 backers on that already. So, and that's, you only have 5 total on there.
Yeah.
So you've seeing a lot of these are being picked up pretty quickly. Some of these premier pledges.
Yeah, it's a nice ego boost.
So Matt, you're no stranger to Kickstarter. You've backed over 140 Kickstarters.
Yeah, much to the chagrin of my wallet.
But that gives you a little bit of street cred, you know, because this is your first one. It says first backed, but 140. So people know this isn't. I always get weary when I see someone back their first Kickstarter and they haven't backed any Kickstarters. I'm like, all right, what's your story here? So there is so you have that street. So what was, and we always have, like, you know, authors and artists and people that look at doing Kickstarters or have done Kickstarters in the past, that watch or listen. So what advice would you give someone being your very first Kickstarter to able to hit over 50% on your first day? What would be some advice that you would say, this is what I learned before, this is what I wanted to, these are the things that these steps I wanted to make sure I did first? What were some of those things that you did to prepare?
I will say that we consulted with a buddy of mine, my friend Easton DeVerna, who's also a writer. He's wrote a couple of things, Samurai Grandpa for Source Point Press. He's done some creator-owned work as well. We talked to him. He's had 3 or 4 successful Kickstarters by now. And we just kind of asked him all the questions, like, what do we need to look out for? You know, he stressed about making sure our shipping numbers are correct, you know, making sure we're charging enough for shipping. He stressed like keeping it as bare bones as possible, which is what I wanted to do anyway in the first place. Because listen, it's nice to get all like the fun, you know, tchotchkes with your Kickstarter, like a pin or, you know, a poster, all that stuff. That stuff is great. Right. But like for us, we wanted it to be strictly about the book. You know, right. We did do the art tiers, which is great, but that kind of coincides with the book. But yeah, keeping it as bare bones as possible, keeping the goal as modest as possible, was incredibly important to us. Again, we're not, Pete and I are not taking a page rate on this book. We're not making it. We're not looking to make money on this book. Our costs are simply going to Kickstarter fees, production, and printing, and that's it. Any extra money we get off of this is going to go into hopefully a second volume. Okay. So yeah, I would say keep it modest. You know, try to limit, I guess, the amount of extra stuff you do. Because I think the other thing I learned, I talked to another friend of mine, Scott Brian Wilson, who's a writer, and he told me at one point for one of his Kickstarters for a book he wrote called True Cult, he was getting merch for the Kickstarter from like 6 different vendors. So he'd have to wait for all that merch to arrive, and then he'd have to sit there with his family and pack up every individual package for Kickstarter. He said it took forever. So I wanted to, you know, again, limit that as well. this is strictly about the book. Maybe in volume 2 we can explore some other merch and things like that, but even still I don't think I would do it then either. Like I really like this just being about the book. You know, yeah, you get a bookmark, you get a couple stickers, cool. If you do the art tier, you'll get a canvas or a little commission. That's cool too. But the less legwork that everybody has to do to fulfill and then receive the Kickstarter is the better. It's just a better experience all around.
Okay. And so, you know, with that, when you guys also got together to do this, you know, granted you guys met across the room at a Christmas party, but but when you sat down and decided to do this, did you say, okay, listen, I know we're friends, but did you guys make a contract to say, like, say for instance, you get Above and Beyond, have you decided, like, so is there anything that would you recommend that to say if you're looking at artists and letters and stuff like that?
So I would definitely recommend, if you're working with somebody that you don't know, to get into a contract situation. Again, Pete and I, we've been friends for longer than we've been creating. So, you know, and we have a pretty similar understanding for how this all works and you know what the end result is going to be. So I think that's helpful. But yeah, for sure, if you're going to work with anybody that you don't know, like, draft up some kind of contract.
Right. Yeah. So what is so as you mentioned, so is there, obviously you kind of already insinuated it. Is there ideas for a volume 2 and a volume 3 or an ongoing series like this?
So yeah, there's ideas for volume 2. As soon as actually before I was even done writing it, I kind of pitched Pete what I think a volume 2 would look like. So yes, hopefully, if everything goes well, fingers crossed, I think it will. But we'll definitely start once this is all wrapped up. Once, you know, everyone has their book and you know, we've done a couple of shows, we'll start production on a volume 2.
You know, I will say, you know, sometimes I need a palate cleanser with my art, right? I'm drawing page after page. Like, I just need to do something off the wall, silly. Usually it's in a notebook at work, like during a meeting I'm like paying attention to, you know, and it's so I've actually scribbled out a few things, you know, like potential designs, potential things,
Right.
you know, like what does this character look like in a more different scenario kind of thing, you know.
And because you have, what's interesting, because you have a great fan base for Dungeons and Dragons crowd. You got a great fan base for the anthology comic crowd, which is a fast growing, you know, group of readers. People,
Yeah.
There's a fervent, subculture of people who like the comic anthology, but then you also have the people that like comics too.
Yeah,
is there? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because like a year and a half ago, when the pandemic was kind of like in its infancy, like I hadn't really backed anything on Kickstarter, maybe like a thing or two, right? And you know, I was more into mainstream kind of stuff, and I think over the last year and a half, I've backed a good handful of anthologies, which, you know, I never really read anthologies before, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I have to say that just those anthologies alone, the ones that I backed, you know, have kind of turned my taste a little bit. You know, like now I look forward to these projects that I'm seeing on Kickstarter, I'm hearing about through people's tweets or Instagram or whatever. And you know, that just wasn't me before. And it's, what's awesome is it's like, you could take that anthology to work, you could read somebody's little section, and then you could kind of pause on it, and then you can go back to it on a break or something. And it's and it exposes you to just like how many talented people there are out there. And there's a lot, you know.
Right.
So if it wasn't for anthologies in general, I don't know where I would be artistically. You know, I think I'd be thinking, you know, things have to be a certain way. You know, I wouldn't be experimenting with my own stuff so much. You know, that very well could have impacted the visual nature of our book.
Right. You know, and I think too, people are starting to get more because of this streaming
Mhm.
world we live in, where you've seen, you know, like Black Mirror or, you know, Tales from the Loop. People have started to see this anthology type format,
Yeah,
and people are being more familiar with it as well.
for sure. For sure.
Do you see yourself too, Matt, as like in the sense of that? Do you think you've tapped into something that people like the idea of the concept of tapping into as I say, a tertiary character to become the main protagonist? Do you see, you know, this as that being the genre instead of the high fantasy piece, like doing like a space mechanic or like someone who's like like someone that's like
I mean, I to be honest, like I hope so. I think I really liked writing our character Martiln, because he just really is that. He's like an NPC. Like he doesn't, you know, he does kind of find himself in the book and discover some things about himself and his family. But like for the most part, like he's not really involved like in the action. Like there's parts of the book where the action doesn't even happen really on screen. It happens off screen. So and he's doing stuff his own way. He's adventuring in his own way. So it was just a lot of fun to write, again, like an underdog character. Like I feel like people relate to that. Like you know, not everyone can relate to a Conan. You know what I mean? Like we're not all out there swinging swords and betting ladies. You know what I mean? I mean, not during work hours, but again, like I just wanted to write a character that I felt you know, connected to in that way. Like I felt like an underdog my whole life. You know, getting into comics, we're all underdogs, right? Until we start writing for the big two or getting, you know, paid page rates. So I just, again, like I found it more enjoyable to write a character that isn't, you know, the hero necessarily, but kind of hero adjacent.
Right. Hey folks, I just wanted to take a quick break and say thank you so much for listening and watching Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. If you can, please subscribe. If you can, hit the like button. Go ahead and leave a review on your favorite podcast app that you might be listening to this on. And remember, always, always support local artists, support local writers, support independent creators. It sure does mean a lot to them. And we will be here at Storycomic to make sure that their voices are being heard. Thank you. Is there an overall message you want your readers to come out of on this after they read this?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest message I think is number one is like don't let other people dictate who you are and who you should be. That's the biggest theme of the book. I mean, just to kind of quickly sum it up, the Bard is the son of this famous warrior, and they come from a long line of other famous warriors. Every male in their family was a warrior, and they all died heroically, and he's the only one that decided to go against the grain and pursue music over you know, learning how to swing a sword and fight. So I would just say, like, don't feel that pressure to be something that you don't want to be. Like, be your own person. As long as you're not hurting anybody and you're, you know, and you're being true to yourself, like that's really all that counts in life, to be honest.
Right. And what about you, Pete? What spoke to you about this project?
I mean, Matt hit the nail on the head. You know, it's at its core, it's a story about somebody who's not afraid to be themselves, and that is the moral of the story, I think. You know, throughout all of this, you know, my personal story, I guess, has been, you know, in the hopes that, you know, through this, like, in some way, shape, or form, you know, that I can encourage somebody, maybe my kids, maybe somebody else, you know, to dive into their own artistic talent and to do something that they want to do. You know, you know, I had big goals and dreams of doing this many years ago. And, you know, nobody gets into comics for the paycheck.
Right.
And, you know, when you have a family to support, some things have to get put to the side. Now that my kids are older, my goal is that from this, I can show them, and hopefully maybe somebody else, that it's okay. It's okay to pause on your dreams if you have to, but you have to be true to yourself and go back to them. And that very much, I feel, aligns with the core of our story, that, you know, you have to be true to yourself.
And so, I mean, so yeah, with that said, do you see that as being, could this story have been told because of that if it was as you said, like a major type of player character in a way?
I suppose it could. I think I feel like using a lesser known character or a lesser used character type just makes her a better story. Again, like he's the everyman, right? Like he's just a guy trying to go on adventures, not necessarily be involved in them, but he needs content. Like he needs to play songs, he needs to tell stories, like, so he wants to be involved in these ventures, but he's not directly affecting them. He's just kind of there. So I think it's just a better story all around to have that character that is kind of there, but then like sort of gets forced to, you know, to act in certain without giving anything away, in certain situations. Like he kind of gets pushed into the forefront, whether he wants to be or not.
From a writing perspective, how would you describe, did you feel as though like the two of you kind of sit down and kind of say, all right, we need to kind of create a setting here. We know it's going to be this high fantasy, but were there certain things you say, well, let's not put this in because that'll be a little too much like that? Or is there anything that's kind of specific to this world you've created?
I think as far as like world building is concerned, I think so much of it just came through off the cuff stuff. You know, like Matt and I have messaged, you know, practically daily for a year, where it's like, hey, did you see this thing? And then I'd say, yeah, I saw this thing. And then like we talk about, you know, whatever, like a movie trailer or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's, hey, had an idea. And then we go right into, you know, little things. And then it would just kind of snowball. And every time an idea clicked, we were just like, okay, we're using it. Okay, we're using it. You know, and if it didn't, it didn't. But we just kept rolling.
And so Matt, because you said you mentioned in a previous interview that this is the funnest project you've ever worked on. What made this? How was this different than some of your previous projects?
So, again, to what Pete was saying, like just to tag on what he's saying, like it's exactly for that reason. Like it's for the reason that like him and I would just go, hey, what about this thing? Like what if we did this? And he would go, yeah, totally. And then he would do the same thing. Like, what if we did this? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. Like it's just it's fully collaborative, right? So in comics is really insular. Like if you're doing like work for hire, for me, like as the writer, like I would write a script, I would hand it over to the editor, like I'd have conversations with the editor and then make changes if I had to, or if not, then they would pass it off to the penciler, and then I would never see it again until it's done.
Right.
So like you lose some of that, right, when you're doing stuff like this. But in this case, like this is so so collaborative. Like we're working side by side for the most part. And that includes with Matt Krotzer, the letterer. Like we tell him like, hey, like we have this idea for this thing. Like, can you roll with it? Show us what it would look like, and we'll go from there. It's just, again, it's super collaborative, super fun. And there was no stakes really for this. Like this is something we were working on the side. Like, you know, we didn't have a timeline that when we wanted to finish it until we started coming to the end. Then we're like, all right, we need to, you know, we're coming to the end. We want to get this out on Kickstarter at this time. But even then, like I would always tell Pete, like, hey, dude, like we make the rules here. Like we can, if we need to push back on the Kickstarter for now, like we could do that. We can release the book whenever we want to. Of course, we want to do it as soon as possible. But again, like no stakes, like super low pressure, and just fun. Like it was just a lot of fun to just be like, hey, let's try this. Like, let me write this thing and let's write this joke, or what do you think about this? And it it was just the best time, honestly.
Yeah. It really was, and like I think there's been a lot of messages where like I'll just I'll send him something that I put together, and then, he'll send something back like, oh my God, that guy in the background, and it's just like, like we're trying to, trying to take Matt's script and visualize it is I find it to be very easy, right? Like he's very pointed at like this is the context, this is what we're looking for, but he's not saying, to such a specific level where it's like, okay, I have to draw it in this way and it becomes robotic, right? Like it's cool that I get to visualize how I want things to be visualized, and I use Matt's script as a guideline to do that. It's been totally great.
And then also your letterer, did your letterer had to make his lettering different to the style of each part as well, right? Did Matt had to do that?
Yeah. So we specifically, I asked him specifically. So for the for like the noir Frank Miller Sin City story, I told him, I said, I need you to make this font as close to Frank's as you possibly can. Right. Like I need to, and he even like every verse has a title card that we see, and he even made like a Sin City-esque title card for it. Yeah. So yeah, he's been super great about like when we tell him like, hey, we need it to look like this, he just knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, he does.
And I think it's in the Kickstarter it mentioned was it 64 pages, and then but it's going to be 80 pages or so based with some art in the back as well.
Yeah, we have 66 pages of sequential of story.
Okay.
And then we have a bunch of bonus content. We have some pinups from some artists that we brought on. We have a full map of like places where the story takes place. There's some other places that we don't see in the story but are just there to fill the map out. And then we have what are they called, Pete? Character sheets? Like the D&D noob sheets on the team. But if you want to play like some of the main characters in a D&D game, like from our book, we had character sheets made up of them. So you could pick the main character Martillon, you could pick his father. I think who else is in there? Lord Bort,
Gary.
And Gary, the yellow goblin, who we love, who became our favorite character out of nowhere.
He's the best.
But yeah, there's just that extra, and Pete drew like a bunch of like stuff that we haven't even shared anywhere for the book, like little like promo pieces and things like that we'll put back there. But yeah, just fun like back matter to fill the book out. Yeah.
No, did your buddy that gave you some tips on Kickstarter? Is there anything that he told you about? Because now with the pandemic, there's been a lot of delays and shipping delays and stuff like that. Was there any specific advice that you would give to people that are thinking about doing a Kickstarter now?
Don't start it a week before or a week after the postal service changes the price for shipping. That was kind of a bummer. Not like a huge deal. I mean, the price for like media mailers only went up like, I think it was like 80 cents or something, 60 cents, something like that. Okay. So it wasn't like a huge deal, but like when we were trying to do the math, like we were basically told that, and like we were like putting it into like what is it called, Matt? Like review with Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It was getting put into review. So like we kind of had to have some math built in. And it's like, what if media mailers go up $2? Well, then
right.
That's a bad spot.
And also like printing, is there any tips or advice or recommendations for, because you did mention like that canvas printing service. Is there any printing services that you guys really grab a hold to that you prefer?
Well, I think when we first started looking at like different printing options, we ran through all the big ones. We went through like Ninja, we went through a couple others, and we decided with something like that, with like I think it's called Print Ninja. You know, like all of their printing is actually happening overseas. So it's
Right.
like if you're going to print it, they're basically just a third, like they're a middleman here between you and the printer. And that printing is going to come from probably Asia. They're making a premium off of what you're paying, probably. And then it's going to get delayed. So that didn't work. And then we started looking at what was the place we landed on, Matt? Mix'em?
Mix them. Yep.
Mix'em. And they're printed in the US. You know, we've got fantastic lead times. So when we're all set and we know what that hard number is to print, you know, we're going to have physical product very quick.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, they got a few bells and whistles options. Not that we were really looking too much for that, but
Right.
but yeah, they've got some awesome features too. I would definitely recommend checking them out.
Okay. Good. And they're also where you're getting like your pins and your book, you know, your bookmarks and prints and stuff there from there too.
A lot of that stuff's actually going to be local.
Oh, good.
Locally acquired. You know, the stickers. The stickers I actually ordered elsewhere, but the book plate and bookmark we're doing local. I'm doing local to me. So
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah, always good to support local if you can. Yeah.
yeah, and that's kind of hard, I think, in this business, right? So it's
Right.
wherever you can.
Right. Good. Well, this is exciting stuff. So I got to say, once again, guys, you got 30 days and you've already got like 77 backers. So, any tips that you would give to the listeners or the viewers on how to create that base? You know, how to create that audience before your Kickstarter? How did you do that?
It's a lot of, so I mean, as you mentioned before, like I've been in comics for a while.
Yeah.
I've met a lot of other creators. I've supported a lot of Kickstarters for other creators. So we kind of have like we have people in the background like helping us, you know, as far as like sharing and supporting and things like that. I would just say like support other Kickstarters. You know, if you're a creator, like get out there, like talk to other creators, like form that like creator friend group, because that has been invaluable for us.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have done this if I didn't you know, have a bunch of people that I could talk to, ask them questions about Kickstarter, ask them questions about shipping, and again, ask for their help. Like if I put out a tweet, like we have a group chat with a bunch of creators. If I put out a tweet, I'll ask them like, hey, can you go on this tweet and like retweet it and like it and comment on it so that it gets better, you know, view, like the algorithm favors it better for whatever reason. And we found that stuff works. Again, we hired somebody to write up like press releases for us and send them out to outlets and things like that. I would do that, try to get on podcasts to talk about the book, we were talking about this book since we started it. Once Pete had like the first basically the first character drawing of our character Martin, like we were talking about this book, talking about that we were working on it. Yeah, just keep talking about the things you're working on, keep promoting other creators, talk to other creators, and yeah, like it's just it is a lot of work, but at the end of the day it's clearly worth it. So
yeah, and not to be discouraged, right? Because I think it's easy to fall into like some level of discouragement, or you know, real life gets in the way, and that kind of stuff happens. You know, the trick is basically, you know, not to let it hold you down. It can get you down, but you got to get back up, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, you get knocked down, you got to get up again. I mean, they're never going to keep you down. All right.
Yeah.
Wait, did you just quote Chumbawamba? That's it. It just
well played.
The Chumbawamba method.
Well played.
The tub thumping.
Well, this is great, guys. So this is I'm really excited to check this out, and you know, and congratulations on putting out putting out the book. Congratulations on getting it together, and and really excited to see the future projects of Summo and Collins Incorporated.
Awesome.
We got some, like I said, we have some stuff in the works. I don't want to tip my hand too much, but there is a potential follow-up for this. So fingers crossed everything goes well. And
right. So that's a Storycomic Presents exclusive then, right? You just mentioned.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is potentially a theoretical exclusive.
Yeah. Maybe.
Maybe. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys, and I look forward to seeing more of your projects.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And so, Pete, you got all your pop culture stuff behind you, huh?
It's I bought all this stuff, but it's my son's. I hide in his room for these because it's the coolest room in the house, both visually and temperature wise.
Right.
And it's the only place where I can sneak away. It's like in the far corner of the house, so like no one bugs me.
You tell your son that's why he's like, Daddy's gotta do. I gotta go talk about comic books. So can I go in your room for your comic
yeah. Yeah. The other day I was like, you got to make sure your room's clean, and he's like, my room's pretty clean. I'm like, but it's not camera clean. Get in there and take care of it.